Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of Not Overthinking. Taimur, how are you doing today? It feels like it's been a while since we've said that.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I think we should just skip the bit where we talk about why we haven't done a podcast in a while. I think we do. We've done that like every pod for the last probably like 5 episodes.
Yeah, for the last 2 years, pretty much.
Yeah, so let's skip that bit and just get into the pod. I'm doing well. We just had a bunch of people over for brunch and then just hanging out. And then we went to a carol service at the local church. It
Oh, that's
turns
fun.
out that a friend of mine from college meaning university, is actually a reverend at the local church where we live,
Oh,
like 2 minutes away. And
great.
actually, turns out he lives on the same road as us now. So we just moved to this new area like 2 months ago.
Nice.
So yeah, he and I are gonna catch up properly at some point. But yeah, it's been a good weekend. How about you? Where in the world are you?
I am in Santa Monica, Los Angeles right now.
Wowzers!
Yeah.
What's going
It's
on over
alright.
there?
It's really sunny. It's really nice. The weather's amazing. I'm here for like a week in total, but in that week, I am flying to London and back for like 3 days.
Why?
So yeah, it's been pretty mental. It's like, so I was invited to go on Diary of a CEO, and the only date that worked for both our schedules was like the 15th of December, because they want the
Really?
episode to come out on the 2nd of Jan. And I was in America for this time period. And so I was like, you
Yeah.
know what? This is such a huge podcast. Screw it. Let's fly to London for literally a day, 2 days, and then fly back.
How many what are the stats of that pod? Because I don't know anyone who I don't know, like none of my like tech bro type friends, like none of my like podcast listening friends listen to it, but it does seem to be quite a big podcast.
It's absolutely huge. Our publisher says an appearance in Diary of a CEO moves more books than 20 other podcasts would.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. It's absolutely enormous. I think it is it's absolutely enormous in most people I know who love it are women
Okay.
and non tech bro type people.
Okay. Right.
Like it really appeals to like normal people.
Okay.
Because it's not about like the specifics of like tell me about your marketing funnels and all that shit. It's about like the emotions and the feelings and like how did you struggle. And now he's interviewing Esther Perel and asking the questions everyone wants to know about, like how to have a better relationship, and he's interviewing me about how to be more productive. And it's become an absolutely huge. His team is amazing. They're like 30 of them.
Wow.
They're just crushing it across all fronts. We keep an eye on everything they do, and we're just like always amazed as to how ridiculous his podcast is growing. It's
nice.
incredible.
How was your you had sort of some thoughts about your other podcast. What's the latest thinking on the deep dive with Ali Abdaal?
Yeah, latest thinking on deep dive with Ali Abdaal is we're probably going to change up the format of it. I don't like filming. I don't like recording on a schedule, as listeners of Not Overthinking might know.
Nice.
And for deep dive, I kind of realized that I really enjoy having the conversations, but I enjoy having them on my own terms. It's like every quarter we have a week where we've booked in 15 guests and I have to go bang, and forget everything I say. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I show up and do deep dive with Ali Abdaal in a way that's more chill, where the conversations are more the conversations I want to have, rather than someone's promoting a new book and let me ask them the questions that they've got talking points for already.
Yeah. So like, what kind of people would you want more on the pod, on the other pod?
I mean, a lot of it is the people that we would have had on it anyway. But it's like, I've got my friend Noah Kagan is coming over to this hotel room tomorrow night, and we're going to record an episode of the pod, and I'm going to go on his pod, and we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and stuff. It's like that kind of conversation will be cool.
Yeah.
Or if there's a YouTuber in town, I'm like, hey, let's just hang out and just chat about YouTube.
Yeah.
And so rather than me thinking, how do I ask questions that are the most high value for the audience? It's more like, hey, let's just have a chat.
Yeah, let's just
hang
out.
And if people get value from that, amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Not Overthinking blueprint.
Pretty much, yeah. Let's just hang out. Apologize for not like, and then perhaps the guests can just read highlights from a book that they've not.
Yeah. I mean, that's what that's what I got in store today. So. Yeah,
I just filmed a video about 4 books that can change people's lives if they read them.
Yeah, which one?
I don't think you've read any of them.
Oh, mate, I'm missing out on life-changing content.
You're missing out on life-changing content here, man.
Yeah. Wait, what would roughly what the books?
The first one is The Practice by Seth Godin.
Okay.
The second one
I should read that. I do like Seth Godin. I might.
Yeah, the Practice is it's more about shipping creative work, and you tend to do less of that, but it's really good.
Yeah.
The second one is The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale.
Okay.
Earl Nightingale is one of the OG self-help gurus who was around in America in the 1950s and was on
Yeah.
radio programs being motivational and stuff. But it's a
Okay. And
really good book. Yeah.
look. So when you ship a video saying the four books that will like change your life or
Yeah.
change the way you think or something, these are not four books that have actually like fundamentally like really changed the way you think, or are they?
Yeah, they have. Yeah.
They have.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
How many books in total have that accolade for you?
quite a lot. And the reason for
Okay.
this, so I actually mentioned this, like the opening of this video that I've just filmed is about what does it mean when someone says a book has changed their life?
Yeah.
Like my whole thing. So like, for example, I would say the 4 Hour Workweek changed my life. The reason a book changes your life is because it gives you an idea.
Yeah,
That
for sure.
idea leads
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah, yeah.
That idea leads to a decision. The decision leads to action.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
action leads to a result. So
Okay.
anything that improves my life in any way that I've got an idea from a book, I would say that book has
Okay,
changed my
fine.
life.
All right. Okay, fair, fair. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, there's the 4 Hour Work Week tier, which is obviously
Yeah.
like, S tier.
Yeah.
For people who are into anime. But
Wait, is
like,
S tier an anime thing?
I don't know. I don't know. They use
I
this
thought
kind
it
of
was just a
system in
tier
anime.
ranking thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But I think, I mean, it's a tier ranking thing that's used in anime. There was the S and then 1 and then 2, and it's also used in like grading maths papers in some universities and like, yeah.
It's also used in like people are tier ranking like Brandon Sanderson books and like Harry Potter characters
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things
So
like
like
that. Yeah.
internet kind of culture, I think, has adopted it
Oh,
from.
but is it from anime?
I don't know. I mean, it's very common. I like tiers and rankings and like power levels and this kind of. I feel like it's a anime type. It's an anime trope that
Yeah.
like has made its way into internet culture just because of the obviously the overlap
Oh,
there.
fine.
But
And
probably there is a shared common ancestor, if you will, where
yeah.
both anime and other places like have
Yeah. I'm
adopted
sure
this
someone
thing from.
listening or watching this can let us know in the comments.
Yeah, yeah,
Where is the tier ranking system from?
yeah. Um,
Yeah, there are different tiers of this stuff.
yeah, yeah,
Or our work would be S tier. Say the practice would be more like A or B tier. The secret would be the Stranger Secret more like A or B tier. The Second
yeah,
Mountain
yeah.
by David Brooks. Have you come across this? I think
The
you'd love
second
this concept.
mountain.
Yeah, you would love this
No,
shit. This is like right up your
really.
street.
The second
Let me read you
mountain. All
let
right,
me
give
read
me a
you a
highlight.
highlight.
Hit me.
I'll give you a highlight.
All right.
You will be right. This is so up your street. He's basically talking about. You know what? I'm just going to give you this highlight without any context, and you can tell me what the book is about.
All right.
Such a person schedules a meditation retreat here, a Burning Man visit there, one fellowship one year, and another one the next. There's a swing dancing one day, soul cycle twice a week, Krav Maga for a few months, Bikram yoga for a few months more, and occasionally a cool art gallery on a Sunday afternoon. Your Instagram feed will be amazing, and everybody will think you're the coolest person ever. You tell yourself that relationships really matter to you, scheduling drinks, having lunch, but after you've had 20 social encounters in a week, you forget what all those encounters are supposed to build to. You have thousands of conversations and remember none.
Okay.
The problem is that this sort of person in the aesthetic phase, to use Kierkegaard's terminology, sees life as possibilities to be experienced and not projects to be fulfilled or ideals to be lived out. He will hover above everything but never land. In the aesthetic way of life, each individual day is fun, but it doesn't seem to add up to anything.
Okay. So, and the book is called The Second Mountain.
Yeah. So tell me what you think based on pure.
I mean,
Purely
look,
this highlight on context.
there's
Yeah.
like an obvious reading
I
of
mean,
that. But I'm
it's
trying to.
probably pretty obvious. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's pretty obvious. It's not that like, oh my God, you've never thought about this before.
No, no, no. But like, I'm trying to think, what would the whole book be about? This thing? Yeah, I guess just something around like, um, yeah, just something about like, look, the meaningful life, the good life, is broadly about pretty boring stuff that like your grandparents were doing. It's not about anything Instagrammable or anything like this, right?
Yeah, it's like, the first mountain is the mountain of the self, where you're aiming
Right.
for fame and achievement and money and success and all that shit. And then either you get to the top of the first mountain and realize it feels hollow, or you get
Yeah.
knocked off the first mountain into the valley by like death or health problems or a family
Yeah, yeah,
emergency.
yeah.
You
Crisis.
realize that there is a
Mm,
second mountain. And that's the
yeah.
mountain of commitment, of joy, of lasting happiness, lasting joy, rather.
Mm,
The mountain of not optimizing for autonomy, but actually committing yourself to like a
mm.
cause, a vocation, a spouse, a family, a community, or faith, or a philosophy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. Right up
Yeah,
your
and
street.
I feel like I can vibe with that. Um,
Hmm.
I think. Look, here's the thing. Here's the thing, man. I'll say. Okay, I have some. I have a few comments I want to say based on some of what we talked about. So the first is just going back to the podcast stuff. Um, it seems like Louise Perry has kind of Louise Perry, who appeared on your deep dive pod ages ago,
Yeah.
on my recommendation, I might add. It seems like she's kind of like risen the ranks and stuff like that. And I saw that she was on Chris Williamson's pod recently.
Hmm. Hmm.
I hadn't like listened to this pod before, but there was like a kind of really nice high quality YouTube kind of
Yeah, Chris Williamson is
yeah
absolutely crushing it on the podcast.
and it seemed like I kind of listened to maybe like an hour of that just kind of in the background while I was doing stuff, and it seemed his style seems like quite different. It's his. I mean, I was kind of waiting for him to go like, all right, so Louise, tell me about your shtick, or I was waiting. They were just like chatting, and I thought, okay, this is like they're just like chatting, and then at some point he's gonna go like, okay, cool. So Louise, look, thanks for coming on the podcast. You've written this book, Haze Against the Sexual Revolution.
Oh,
Give me
that was
the.
the first episode he did that he did with her
Oh, they've
ages ago.
already done one. So it actually
Yeah.
was just halfway through a podcast.
Yeah. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure he's done
okay.
one already. Yeah.
Oh, because
Which was around the time a book came out like 2 years ago.
I was thinking, man, this is groundbreaking podcasting. They're just mid conversation and they're just going.
Oh, it actually
Like,
is, yeah.
they're
Yeah.
not
I
telling
mean,
me about her
Chris is a
spiel. They're
really
not like,
Chris is a really good podcaster. He generally does go straight in.
yeah,
But he also does loads and loads of prep for these episodes, and will have
yeah,
his
yeah,
talking
yeah,
points and his questions and all this kind of stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
he's really good.
Okay, yeah. So I thought that was like a cool format where
Yeah.
it felt like it didn't feel like an interview because it felt like he had clearly thought
Yeah,
about the
he's got his own
subject
take.
and engaged with it. He was like bringing his own takes to the table and they were discussing it and stuff. It wasn't just like, oh, Louise, I know you've got these 10 spiels that that you say on your podcast or whatever, and like let's kind of go through them or something, right?
Yeah, this is also in many ways Chris's specialist subject. Like he is in the process of writing a book about this sort of stuff and has engaged with it for like half his podcast guests have been about this sort of gender relations and all this kind of stuff for a year or two. So
yeah,
he's got some good takes. I like the vibe. Please don't
okay.
cancel me, anyone, for saying that.
So I just wanted to mention that. I thought that was like a cool format. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, you mentioned that for me, if I say a book has changed my life if like I read the book and there's an idea
Yeah.
and that idea leads to action, that action leads to like something or the other. I think like if I think about like, okay, what are the books that have like had the most impact on me? I think it is. I mean, but I don't know if any of the ones that come to mind are like are of the formula that you've described of like, oh, there's some like kernel of something in this book which leads to some action that I start taking and it improves my life or something like this. I have found that when you talk about like our books that'll just like change your life or like change the way you think, whatever. It's much more, I don't know, I found it to be like much more internal stuff. Like there's a book I have a bunch of books on the go, right? One of them in the last few months is a book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by a guy called Thomas Kuhn. Completely changed it, like genuinely like changed the way I see the world. Right. It has not led to any action. Like I'm not just doing anything about this. Right. And like all of the other books.
So it's given you a new lens or a new perspective, but it hasn't directly changed anything about the way you're living.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
That's fine as well. Yeah.
And like I find myself like thinking back to it like pretty often. And just like I think probably a lot of the books on my like, wow, like this book has really stayed with this book is like, this is like part of my worldview now or something. It's not really I think it's never really like direct attributable action.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah, I mean I can totally vibe with that. I guess my whole thing, my profession is in finding actionable insights and sharing them. And so I love reading books that have a takeaway that I can just genuinely changes the way that I approach my life.
Yeah. Fair.
Which is nice. It's also nice to read books that change my worldview and the sense of that kind of thing. But I tend not to read too many of those, at least not right now.
Okay, fair. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so so you're going to do less of your podcast, but like different, just more chill conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it'll end up being less or more, but yeah, just being less like authoritarian about it.
Right. Regimented.
Yeah, kind of like this podcast.
Yeah.
Less regimented about it. But
Okay.
then I think there is, and to cite Seth Godin on this, there is something to be said for showing up every week to just do a
Yeah,
thing.
of course, of course, of course. Absolutely.
And so, but there's also something to be said, like if there was only one thing that I would do that I would show up for in the realm of work, it would be the YouTube channel, not the podcast. As much as I
Yeah.
like the podcast, because I'm never going to be a world class podcaster. It's a thing that I do because it's useful and fun and nice, and so I want to keep it as a thing I do because it's useful and fun and nice, rather than it
Yeah.
being another thing on my to do list every single week.
Yeah, fair. And so what's kind of the latest on the book front? So the book is coming out soon, in a few weeks, right?
Yeah, if anyone has not yet pre-ordered it, please pre-order the book, feelgoodproductivity.com. Book's coming out in about 2 weeks, on
Okay.
December the 26th, and December in the
Nice.
US, and December the 28th worldwide. And so, yeah, it's
So what happens when the book comes out? Is there like, I don't know, like just some confetti go off, something like what it is it just like now search, you can click buy now on Amazon now? Is that
pretty
what
much, you
it
can click
means?
buy now rather than pre-order,
Okay, yeah.
and you can get it straight away rather than like wait for the 26th of December to arrive.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. Been doing a bunch of podcasts with people who've very kindly invited me on their podcast and stuff, which is why I'm in LA and why I'm in like right places. Did Matthew Hussey's podcast. He's great. He's now become a friend. Doing Lewis Howe's podcast, School of Greatness, for the second time on Tuesday. It's like, yeah, these are the podcasts, doing Noah Kagan's podcast, doing Steve's podcast, like this, just basically doing the whole podcast touring stuff
Okay,
while hanging out with people. It's quite fun. It's quite fun in a way.
How are you feeling about the
been
book launch?
How am I feeling about the book launch? I'm trying my best to be detached from the outcome. Like,
Okay.
I know what we're on like 5,000 US hardback pre-orders, 5,000 US other pre-orders, Audible and Kindle. It's like all these numbers. Like, okay, we've got the numbers. We probably need like 12,000 US hardback pre-orders by the time week one finishes to hit the New York Times list, which currently we're not on track for. So it's kind of a question of like in the final week, which is where the bulk of sales come in.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it could go either way. Maybe we'll hit the list, maybe we aren't. Either way. It's like,
what happens in the final week? Like, is it that all these podcasts will come out and more people will hear about it?
Yeah. So the cutoff for the New York Times list is it's like a weekly list, but all the pre-orders count towards week one. And so the end of week one is where all the numbers are tallied.
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
And so usually people don't pre-order books. Although if you're listening to this, please pre-order my book. Usually people don't pre-order books; they'll buy it when it's out. And so in like on the day of release is when we're releasing a YouTube video, another one the following day, 4 emails to the entire email list in that time. All the podcasts are dropping around that time. Like, we're trying to create like this momentum for people to think, oh, there's something here. Let me just get the book.
Yeah.
So yeah, just kind of stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's kind of fun. It's been interesting. I think not hitting the list would be good for my soul.
Really?
Because I haven't really had any failures as such in a while.
Okay.
And this is a goal that I've wanted and I've been kind of aiming for. And if I don't get it, you know, the thing that's bad for the bank account is good for the soul. So there'll be something.
Then it'll be time for the second mountain. What is it? The second mountain?
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. How do you think what do you think? So you think it'll be good for the soul? What do you think would you be feeling there? Like what would?
Yeah, I think I'll be feeling disappointment because there's this goal that I've been aiming for that I haven't achieved.
Yeah.
And I think I'll also be feeling like, nice. This is actually not as bad as I thought it would be, and it will just be another like feeling-y lesson around non-attachment to worldly outcomes that are outside of your control, and focusing on the process, as per the practice by Seth Godin. Just like focusing on the process. Is it going to stop me from writing future books? Hell no. I like the idea of writing more books. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just basically focus on the journey.
Yeah.
Don't fixate on the destination, but it's useful to have a destination in mind as a thing to work towards.
Yeah. Look, I feel like whenever you talk about your feelings on this podcast, you're always like, yeah, I think I would feel disappointed. you know. And there was this episode like 3 years ago or something where you're like, yeah, I feel a modicum of something or whatever
Yeah.
you said. Like, what are we, for the book thing? Like, honestly speak, like how, obviously it would be disappointing, right? Like that, you had this goal, whatever, it would be disappointing. But
Yeah.
like, add a bit more color here. Like, would you be like, gutted? Like how, if you can like simulate that, like, what do you, how, like,
Yeah.
how disappointed would you be?
Honestly, so like my feelings about most things are at an even keel with like
Yeah.
minor fluctuations here and
Yeah,
there.
sure. Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Um, so I uh, I wouldn't be gutted. I would
Okay.
be I would be mildly disappointed. I'd be like, oh, we tried. But I've
Okay.
also absorbed the Kool-Aid of all this stuff. Like I spend my working hours reading stuff about non-attachment to goals and this sort of thing. Like there there's almost no world in which I would feel crushed by not hitting a goal that I had
Okay.
because of all of the Kool-Aid that I've drunk and been thinking about it. Like, it's like the grooves in the mind. My
What's the
groove
what
of being
what's the grooves in the mind?
oh,
I don't know this thing.
it's the idea of like imagine like a field full of
Yeah.
tall grass, and you're sort of walking one particular path. The more times you walk that path, the more the path gets like
Okay,
hollowed
sure.
out.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Fine, fine, fine. Yeah.
And so the groove in my mind of non-attachment to goals is like a really strong groove. The groove in my mind of like I can control my response to most things, and actually emotions are the story you tell yourself about the thing,
Yeah.
is such a strong groove that like it is very rare for something to happen that completely throws me off my groove of
Okay.
equanimity and tranquility and stuff. But I've
Okay.
also been reading Stoicism shit for like literally half my life. Like literally since the age of 15, I've been reading about Stoicism, and I'm now 29. Like half my life, I've been reading this shit. So like,
Okay.
yeah, the groove's there. Um, which is why I don't often experience negative emotions. It's just very, very, very unusual for me to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
There's also a level at which, like, as we talked about in that episode, sometimes the body will feel the thing and will
Yeah.
express like the sadness,
Mm.
or I'll have
Yeah,
tears
yeah.
in my eyes and I wouldn't know how I feel. So there's something that I'm doing which is sort of blocking off the head
Yeah.
heart connection
Right.
kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's something I've been working on a therapist. We're working with a therapist on, but
Okay.
something that even he said, he was like, look, there are some people that are like mild feelers, and there are some people that are like high feelers. And if you're a mild feeler type of person, like your feelings for most things generally tend to be pretty
Mm.
mild, there's almost
Yeah.
no world in which you're going to become a high feeler person. And that's totally okay.
Okay, sure.
What
Yeah,
matters is
yeah,
that
yeah.
we just have a bit more awareness of like, I am
Yeah.
feeling a modicum of something.
Mm.
And so the question of the therapist would be like, okay, what's that feeling? Where is it? Like, where is it in the body? And be like, it's here somewhere. What shape
Mm.
is it? Like, how would you describe it? And this sort of stuff. And when I think of, for example, the disappointment of not hitting this thing, it's like, it's sort of like a little bit of a ball. It's like a little bit of ball of tension, like over here somewhere. And you're
Mm.
like, how do you describe it? It's like, yeah, it's kind of like a sphere. What color is it? It's sort of like dark metal. It's not quite black, but it's sort of like, you're like, how heavy? Oh, it's quite heavy. And it's like, okay. And then part of a lot of these, well, some of these sort of therapy type things, the sort of like NLP, all that shit, is
Mm.
to imagine taking that feeling and imagine bringing it out into the open, and to imagine like
Yeah,
putting
yeah.
a light on it and
Yeah.
happiness on it and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And all
yeah.
this
Yeah.
shit really does work.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how therapist friend would approach the whole feelingsy thing.
Okay, but then what do you think would but why do you think this would be good for your soul then if it's not actually having that much of an impact? Like, I don't know. Like, it's yeah, like, why would this be like some transformational, some like second mountain
It's not
type
it's
of?
not gonna be transformational for the soul. It'll just be good for the
Okay,
soul.
okay, 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 okay,
it'll be
fair.
like
Yeah,
it'll be like doing a workout for a week. Like it's good for the body.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Um,
Okay, nice.
and it's easy to, the thing is with all the stoicism stuff, it's easy to be equanimous when things are going well. It's harder to
Mm,
do it when you get slapped in the face or when something serious happens.
mm,
And so in a way, if something bad happens in my life, that's how you get stronger. That's how you get better.
yeah, for
It's like
sure.
with relationships. Conflict is a good thing in relationships because it strengthens the relationship. If
Mm.
you can approach it in the right way and use it to learn something rather than to
Yeah, of course.
spiral into negativity and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But enough about me. What's been going on in your life recently?
All right, I've had a
How
couple
are things with
couple
the
of
company? How are things with life?
yeah. So a couple of highlights from the last few weeks. The first is I went to see Hamilton. Great, absolutely great
Oh, what do you
play.
think?
So good.
Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it was
It's
awesome,
sick.
man. It was like so inspirational. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like, man,
mate.
he was
When
out
they
there.
when
He
they
was out there
when
writing his essays.
when
I
they
feel
end
like,
the songs with like a and everyone's like, yeah.
yeah, yeah, like he was out there like spreading his ideology, man. Like he would have had a blog today. He'd be on Substack. He'd be going on
Be on Twitter.
podcasts, man. Yeah, be on Twitter. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, the music was great. Really interesting story. Just like really inspirational. I was like, man, I want to start a movement. I need to start a country. Something like this. I
Yeah.
thought it was like, yeah, and yeah, these guys they were like in their 20s or something when they were doing this stuff. So yeah, it was really cool. One thing that did irk me a little bit um, was that
The colorblind casting.
no,
I was gonna say, is that where this is going? Why was George Washington black?
no. What the thing that irked me was that it was like a really like yeah, it was like an awesome like story and all of this kind of stuff, but for some reason they brought what felt like a very out of place, very like modern current like political issue into this thing, which
Which
is
one?
uh yeah, so basically they talk about Hamilton being an immigrant, right? Hamilton being an immigrant, and yes, obviously he was an immigrant in the sense of having moved from this other country to this other country, and in a couple of the songs they have a line like you know
Immigrants, we get the job done.
immigrants coming, rising up from the bottom, or something like this. It's completely out of place. There was no social identity of like being an immigrant at the time. This is not how people were thinking about it. I can guarantee you this was not how people were thinking about it. This is like it felt very anachronistic, where it's like sort of transposing this sort of modern thing, and this kind of yeah a modern sort of narrative and like modern issues that into this thing, and like maybe you could argue that like, well, the purpose of these things is not just like tell some random story, but also like to help people think about modern stuff in a different way, whatever it might be. It felt very out of place. It just felt like just thrown in there, you know as some like thing. Yeah, so that irked me, but apart from that, like, it was awesome. It was sick.
Nice. I think it's a great play. I've seen it twice now.
Really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
it
very
was
good.
it was so good.
Mate, the first time I watched Hamilton, I was so confused why George Washington was black.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I was like, I swear, because Hamilton was white, and I was like, okay, I mean, and then George Washington ended up being black, and I was like, what? I swear this was like pre-slave, like what was the timeline of the slavery thing? And it's like, when were they
Yeah,
running?
yeah,
I was so confused, and in the interval, I asked my friend Iram, who like was the one who got us tickets for this, like
yeah,
when in the week of release, and she was like,
yeah.
"Are you a fucking idiot? Like the whole point is that this is hip hop. It's hip hop inspired. Like it's colorblind casting." I was
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh." I just had no idea of any of the context. I was like, "Oh, people are talking about
Yeah,
Hamilton. Let's go watch it." Who the hell is
yeah,
Hamilton? I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Second
Yeah,
time
that
around,
was great.
I got it. I was like, "Okay, I get it."
I was like, yeah.
Have
Like,
you
all right,
seen
that's George
Frozen the
Washington.
musical yet?
No, I haven't.
You should
I
watch
haven't.
Frozen the musical. It is
Do you think
absolutely
so?
magical. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's so good. It's the
I'm
best
not that
musical I've
into the
ever seen in my
Frozen
life.
music. I'm not that into the Frozen songs and the sort of Frozen soundtrack.
Yeah, but you've still heard of them.
I mean, yeah, I know them, but like,
Yeah, great. That's
yeah,
all you need to know.
I know them by heart, but like,
Great.
do
That's all you need.
you think I'd enjoy it?
I think you'd really enjoy it. I think Lucia would love it as well.
All right. Well,
You should treat her to a night of Frozen.
would she? I'm not sure she'd consider that a treat, but we can see. I don't. I mean, I don't. I don't think she's into Frozen.
It's really good. It's magical.
Okay. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
took my whole team to see it for a team social. All but one person absolutely loved it.
Really
Yeah.
nice. Okay. Yeah. So that was one thing. That was one highlight from the last couple of weeks. The other one, three letters. All right. 3DS. I bought a secondhand Nintendo 3DS, and it is mind blowing. It is absolutely mind blowing. This this is up there with like Chat GPT as like one of the most mind blowing technology experiences I've had in the last like 10 years or something. Right. So
Isn't
the
the
Nintendo
3DS like
3DS.
really old?
Yes, but the Nintendo 3, it was released in like 2011. Okay, released in 2011. It was kind of a flop, actually. The 3DS is like a games console. It was like kind of a flop, and basically the concept is like it's like the Nintendo DS, so it has like two screens. You play games, handheld, whatever. But the top screen is a 3D screen. But the game changing thing is that if you remember like the 3D wave, like 10 to 15 years
Yeah,
ago.
like IMAX glasses and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, it all
Really?
involved glasses. It all involved
Yeah.
glasses, right? And that made it annoying, and that made it like not that magical. So, oh great, well, yeah, I'm wearing this like extra stupid thing, and then that, etc. This does not need glasses. You're not wearing any glasses, and you're looking at a screen that is like 3D. The screen looks like it is a portal into another world. You feel like you can put your hand into the screen and pick out objects from it. And the coolest thing, look, you have to see it. You have to see it to believe it, man. You have to see it. I've been showing everyone I've met in the last 2 weeks this thing. Anyway, it can take 3D photos. It has a camera. It has like a camera app that can take these 3D photos. But obviously, you need to view it on the 3DS to see the 3D effect because it's a hardware thing in the screen. So you can't just like send it to someone's iPhone or whatever. Um, but the effect is magical, man. It's crazy. And the way I've basically been using it as like a little sort of Polaroid type camera, just like take a little snap of like hang out with whoever, just take a little snap for the memories. And the 3D captures that kind of moment and captures that kind of memory in a way that in the way that you're like fancy ass whatever camera with like crazy lens, etc. This like low, like relatively low resolution kind of 3D camera captures a memory way better than anything I've ever seen. Way better than like a video, way better than a 2D video, way better than like some fancy 2D photo or whatever. It's
Yeah,
just
just wait
amazing.
until that Apple Vision Pro.
Yeah, but then you're wearing this
Yeah.
massive thing on your head.
Hmm.
Nintendo was like so ahead of the mate. It's amazing. It's crazy. Anyway, you're gonna have to see it to believe it.
Mate, I'll be in London in about 4 days' time, so you can show me then.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's crazy, man. So yeah, that is another highlight from the last couple of weeks. What
Nice.
else have we got? Um, I read a really good book. Oh, mate, I think you should have this guy on your pod or something. Maybe we should have him on this pod. I read a book called We Built Reality.
Hmm.
I think maybe I probably sent you a link to it after I read it. I was like, oh my God, you have to read this book. It's called How Social Science Infiltrated Culture, Politics, and Power. It's a book
Oh,
by Jason Blakely.
you love this stuff, don't you?
I love this stuff,
You're
mate.
becoming a full-on art student, mate.
I'm not becoming an art student.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, for the record.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, it's so good, man. I gave it to a friend for his birthday last weekend as well. And yeah, I feel like this is another book that's like, really embedded, like sort of changed the way I see the world. And the rough spiel of the book. And I'd like to like sit down and probably go through my highlights and condense this into a proper episode, which maybe we can do at some point. But the rough spiel is basically that the social science, on the face of it, claims to be very much like the natural sciences.
Yeah.
Making these sort of neutral observations about the world with data and stuff like this. And providing sort of like a way to sort of objectively, neutrally sort of understand the world by making these kind of observations the same way that a
Yeah.
physicist would make observations of the moon and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But there's actually a major difference between the social sciences, as we now call them, and the natural sciences. And that major difference is that, weird quantum stuff aside, when you make an observation in the natural science, if you're a physicist who is looking up at the stars and you think, I have, this is my theory of how the planets do, how gravity works, based on my observations or whatever, I think this is how, you making that theory is not going to actually change how the planets work, right? The
Yeah.
planets are still going to do their thing, right? But social science is very different in that regard because we humans, we kind of, it's not like it's not like society and the way we think about ourselves, the way we think about other people. It's not like these things are some like, you know, fixed, like fixed objects of observation. These things are constantly evolving based on the theories that people are proposing. And so when you propose a social science theory that starts to get some traction or whatever, that theory actually changes, the way people conceive of themselves and stuff like that. And so, over the last like 100 years or whatever, we've kind of seen this like vast overreach of social science because it uses the language of the natural science. The natural sciences, right, been hugely successful over the last 300 years, last bunch of 100 years, hugely successful in helping us understand the world, creating technology, making lives better, all this stuff, obviously making lives worse as well, but, hugely successful. And now the language of the natural sciences has become sort of like the dominant idiom that we use whenever we're talking about sort of understanding the world, right? And to use the language of the natural sciences is to kind of give something instant credibility. It's like, we're scientific, data and whatever, right? And there's been a very clear movement in the social sciences. I mean, they're called the social sciences now, right? Like, that's part of the psyop, where over the last 100 years, 120 years ago or something, if you studied politics, you also, politics, economics, history, like these were all, these were all intertwined. It wasn't like you just specialize in like, I just do politics or something. The economy as like its own entity that we now like talk about and study, and we have these metrics. The economy is going up. The economy, this is all stuff that's just been created like, in the last 150 years, something like this. And basically the psyop is, okay, the psyop number one is that the social sciences uses the kind of neutral, objective language of the natural sciences, which makes a layperson automatically think these are like the same things. The physicist makes an observation about the stars. The social scientist makes an observation about how people are behaving in this society or whatever. These are the same thing. They're not the same things at all. So that's number one. The second psyop is kind of like the so he talks about how there's kind of been this big change in academia where because academia and academic research in the humanities is driven by funding, as in the sciences, there's over the last sort of 50 to 100 years, there's been an increasing need for subjects to be able to quantify the impact of what you might be researching or something like this. And quantification, has historically been the realm of the natural sciences. And so in all of these, in all the various fields of the humanities, there's been this kind of push to try and do something like quantitative, something objective, quantitative, data-driven, whatever, right? And so you have these sort of like quantitative strands of all of the, the various humanities subjects, which is really driven by a need to be able to justify why your thing should get funding. Because it's like, hey, we're doing this like quantitative scientific thing, and this will provide insights which can be used in industry and business and whatnot, right? And so the whole thing has kind of been like, super, it was like kickstarted by the success of the natural sciences and the humanities kind of wanting to like, get a little bit of that prestige or whatever. And then it was like supercharged by just the way academia operates, and it was funding and things like this. And what it has kind of led to is like a bunch of stuff that we now consider like, oh, this is just like the way people are. I'll read you one highlight. So one thing that he takes aim at quite a lot is basically a lot of sort of economic science and sort of economic models of understanding society, understanding ourselves, and particularly rational choice theory, which was proposed 100 years ago, something where we can kind of think of ourselves as these like rational actors within the system, where we are trying to get the best outcome from ourselves, the other person is trying to get the best outcome from themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really just like a framing, right? You can frame anything in terms of this like rational choice theory. Oh, well, the reason that thing unfolded the way it did is, you just look at the incentives, bro. Like person A is just optimizing, perfectly rationally for, their self-interest. Person B is obviously rationally optimizing for their self-interest. You look at the incentives, this is why this event has happened. This is why, this thing is going the way it is, whatever it might be. And now when we like conceive of ourselves, when we conceive of society, we actually see ourselves as like, hey, there's a bunch of these like rules and incentives going on in society. I've got like my self-interest here. Like, of course I'm going to play the game and try and get as much of the thing of that is the rational scientific thing to do. Like, I would be stupid not to do that. And so this kind of rational choice theory over the last 100 years, because of the way it's made its way into just kind of like lay people's discussions, books like Freakonomics, all the whole like Freakonomics type movement of like, oh wow, the economics can help us like understand the world and make sense of society. This is this is not neutral observations going on. This is actually a value system that is being kind of read into society, where people aren't realizing that. People are saying, oh, this is just neutral observation. Actually, it's a set of values of like, hey, this is how you should think of yourself as a human being. This is how we should relate to each other in society. And now it's kind of under the guise of like a sort of a science of like, oh well, and it's kind of hard for us to think of an alternative. And that's kind of the whole point of the book of like, look, these theories, these observations when it comes to psychology, when it comes to economic, these are not just kind of observations. All of these things are laden with their own worldview, their own values, their own sort of set of values. And if you can't spot that, then the way you think about yourself, the way you think about society is just going to be transformed by these things, as it has been. And it's an amazing book about this, basically. Nice. Just the massive psyop of a lot of social science.
Yeah, I've been coming across this sort of idea. Have you come across the Dan Ariely drama?
I know he's one of these like economist type bros, but I don't know.
Yeah, so he wrote a book called Predictably Irrational, which is like, okay, oh my goodness, did you know in these circumstances human beings are predictably irrational, and like they act in irrational ways, and it can be explained by this.
Right. Yeah, this kind of stuff. Yeah,
and someone did an analysis of his like numbers and realized he'd been making some shit up in his studies and stuff that he published like 10 years ago, and this was a whole thing. So I was watching a bunch of videos about this where people were basically saying this thing, this sort of thesis that you're saying, which is that anything with the word science on it is automatically BS because you have to put the word science on the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's a great heuristic.
And how this idea of like, the whole funding thing, you have to demonstrate how this will help industry, how this will help companies, and therefore, you need to show positive results, otherwise your entire career is screwed.
Yeah,
and therefore you would have to start doing potentially dodgy things to show a positive result for a thing. And the interesting books, the ones that Oprah gets on, the ones that Ali Abdaal talks about on Deep Dive on his channel, are like where there's some sort of counterintuitive the marshmallow.
Yeah.
Did you know that? Like, that's wow.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I've been sampling this take.
Mate, you'd love the book, and it's not a dense book. It's like it's really not a dense book. It's like very readable. It's not very long. He's on Twitter as well, Jason Blakely. I'd recommend follow. He doesn't actually tweet about his work very much, which I think he should, because like it's really interesting stuff and more people should know about it. But his Jason Blakely. Yeah, just Jason W. Blakely on on Twitter. Yeah, so that's that's a big highlight from the last couple of months. I was going to say something else about that. And it's really interesting because actually, as I was listening to the Chris Williamson thing with Louise Perry, every single tangent, the conversation kind of meanders a little bit every time a new sort of conversation topic is proposed. It is of the format. Yeah, I read this interesting study recently that's blah 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 blah, or like that man, actually if men do this and women are like this, or whatever it might be. Every tangent began with, yeah, I read this interesting study about this thing, and like probably some of these studies are good. I have no idea which ones. No one listening has any ideas which ones, and so I find it. I find the whole like studies show, or like new studies show that scientists are saying this. I just find it so challenging to actually like make anything of this information, because we know that a majority of these studies are just bad. They're just bad science, right? We know that, right? The whole replication crisis. We know that is the baseline. When you then understand that actually, like these are not neutral observations, right? Like whoever is like doing the study, there's like so much wiggle room for all sorts of stuff to creep into this, whatever agenda. There's so much wiggle room for agendas, et cetera, to creep in, just like bad statistics, bad science, bad philosophy. So much room for all of this stuff to creep in, that if someone is like, oh, studies show this thing, like honestly, the best way I can like use that information is basically to think, okay, let's hear what he's saying. Let's hear what he's about to say next, and let me see what I think about that, because I can't really do anything with this. Like studies have shown, this particular thing in the realm of sort of social science type stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that social scientists do use to Peter Attia has a book, Outlive. You've probably come across it on the grapevine.
I've heard of Peter Attia.
Yeah, he's it's a really good book. It's about like how to live longer.
Okay.
And there are a bunch of criteria that you can use to determine, is a study good?
Sure.
And he does a really good job, I think, of talking through them, of like, is the effect size huge?
Yeah.
Makes it, is the mechanism underneath this thing a plausible mechanism, or all this sort of stuff.
Absolutely.
So I like the way that I think of, or the way that we were looking at these social science studies when writing this book was kind of based on that principle of like, and also based on the principle of like, even if this is not true, even if this wouldn't be replicated in a lab today, does it vibe with personal experience? Does it vibe with what we intuitively know? Reasonable?
Okay. Yeah. Look, absolutely. I've got Peter Attia's thing open. It looks like what most of Peter Attia's book will be about is like, the effect of, certain diets on like the body, certain like chemicals, whatever. This is not what I would call social science. This is like, this is not as like rock solid as making astronomical observations through a telescope.
It's not as rock solid. It's
but it is much a lot more like that than it is about like some psychology study about whatever. And the point you're making about the psychology study thing is interesting, because I totally agree. I just said it. I said, like, look, when someone goes, studies show that actually this thing, I ignore the studies show. I listen to them. I listen to what they say next, and I think, oh, does that sort of make sense? Does that sound about right? Does it vibe with my intuition? These are just, and so I think this really proves the sort of point around the sort of the role of science, scientism, as you'd call it. It's that, hey, we have to couch, sure, it is fine to just talk about, well, I had this experience or whatever. A bunch of people have this intuition that like X, Y, Z is good or whatever. And like, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. And, you try it out, try live it, try doing this thing in your life too. That's totally fine. But the fact that, for example, if you are writing a book, for that book to be taken seriously, you have to couch it in the language of science. Like, well, studies have shown this. What I'm saying here is legitimate because studies have shown this thing, and I've got a bunch of references. You can go check them out. There's like 5 references for this thing. There's like 5 references. I think it kind of proves the point that like, hey, there's interesting ideas in the book for sure. Why do we need to do the song and dance about what is probably a mixture of bad science, bad philosophy, and bad statistics to give it an air of legitimacy when we can just talk about the ideas? And you had to do this. You had to do all this studies show shit because that's what you have to do now because of this entire phenomenon. right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
I would
look,
agree with you.
probably a bunch of those studies are good.
Yeah.
Probably a bunch of them are shit. Who knows which ones, right? Maybe, probably you've done a bunch of research. Probably you have some sense. Like, I don't know.
I think there's also something to be said for the value of a good story.
Yeah. Then let's chuck the studies out the window then, or like let's
No,
not.
the studies can sometimes. Okay, so the way that like we're crafting these kind of nonfiction books is, what is the point that I want to make?
Yeah.
And let me find, because people like stories, let me find either a scientific study or a case
Yeah.
study or an anecdote that's
Yeah, for
interesting
sure. For
of
sure.
that thing in action.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
there are scientific studies.
Yeah, yeah,
Which,
yeah.
or
Look, okay, Ali,
yeah,
I understand. I obviously have nothing against crafting a narrative or whatever.
sure.
What I think is
I also fully
what I
understand
think
where you're coming from.
the
Yeah,
game is basically a game of manipulation where it's like, hey, I've got these ideas that I actually just have for reasons that are known only to me. I have these ideas that I'm putting into a book, right? Let me now go and find a bunch of studies or whatever to make you look. I didn't arrive at these ideas by looking at these studies. I have these ideas. I didn't arrive at them by looking at the studies, right? Let me now find
no,
a bunch of studies to make you you like
I
arrive
disagree.
at yeah.
That's not there. There is a little bit of that. There's not a huge amount of that. It's not a case of like I want to make claim X, or a researcher, can you find
Yeah.
some evidence that backs up claim X? I mean, all I can speak to is my like. Okay, the point I'm making is not that you are wrong. It's that
Yeah.
I fully take what you're saying, and also I think there is value to be gained in attempting to study a phenomenon in a lab, and if the study is well designed and tries to
Yeah.
control for all the things that can be
Yeah. Yeah.
controlled,
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
you might have
Yeah.
50 people doing a thing, and let's just see what happens. And if the effect size is sufficiently interesting, cool. Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I think what I would like agreement on is that
Yeah.
the current state of public discourse
Yeah.
on science, social science, studies,
Sure.
data, scientists say
Yeah.
trust the science, trust the data. The current it's just pure psyop. It is just absolute psyop levels of manipulation. I think.
I agree. I wouldn't say pure
Right.
psyop. I would say maybe
It's
80%
it's
psyop.
like it's like yeah, pretty high levels of like psyop for manipulative purposes. I think.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that
but yeah, that's
I,
kind of
I buy that.
that's my main point. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, We
I
Built
think
Reality, great book.
I think there's also very big. It depends on what the study is and
Absolutely,
all of
absolutely.
that kind of
But
stuff.
no, it absolutely does. I'm not saying all of this stuff is bad.
Sure.
I'm saying there's a spectrum from like
Yeah.
Galileo or whatever. Actually, Galileo is an interesting one because Galileo's theory about how planets orbit the sun or whatever about the solar system. Galileo's theory was it took about 100 years after he died for Galileo's theory to actually be confirmed with like empirical data. Galileo had the right theory. The data wasn't matching the theory, but he stuck with it. He was like, no, man, like this is it. This is the way it works. It took like 100 years for us to actually be able to gather data correctly and see like, oh wow, okay, like that guy who died 100 years ago was actually right about this thing. It wasn't like Galileo sat there gathering a bunch of data and thinking, I have this empirical data now. Let me find a theory. What theory must this fit into? It was like Galileo, for reasons of who knows, bad data that he misinterpreted, gathered wrong. He thought, okay, this is how the thing works. 100 years ago, he was proven. 100 years afterwards, he was proven right. And I think that also just kind of goes to show that like the public narratives around how this stuff works just completely false.
Yeah,
just massive psyop. Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway, I'll do a big like I'll condense my highlights and stuff of We Built Reality, and then we can do a organized book episode about that. Not just me like reading out a bunch of
that sounds great.
A bunch of random highlights. But yeah, that was a really good book. Let me just think if there's any other highlights. I should probably get to bed very soon. But
hey, what time is it for you? It's like 3 p.m.
It's
for me.
now 11 p.m.
My goodness. Yeah, and then you can start with the next episode with, oh, absolutely knackered, mate.
Yeah. Oh, mate. Yeah.
How's your calendar doing these days?
Calendar is actually pretty good. Yeah, I'm in a good rhythm. I don't have like tons of calls. Yeah, cool. I think calls and stuff's going really well, Hamza, man. I think it's like we focused in on just our self-serve product. So anyone can just go on the website, sign up for free, just basically use it themselves, enter their credit card. Ideally, they don't have to talk to us. We're around to help if they need. But yeah, that's what we're focusing on. And so we made like tons of product improvements recently. That seems to be going well.
Can I now use the QuickBooks wizard and understand what's going on?
Oh, dude, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, you should. Yeah, you should go through the flow at some point. Yeah. But no, calendar is looking good. Any other like quick highlights from the last couple of months? I'm just looking through any Kindle book. Yeah, that was probably the big one. We Built Reality.
I spent 6 days at a Tony Robbins event.
Oh yeah, I wanted to hear about this. Yeah.
We can talk about it next time.
Yeah, we should do a proper episode about the whole Tony Robbins stuff.
Yeah.
Was it good though? Was it as good as the first one?
It was good. Yeah. The first one was more about how to grow your business. This was more about how to figure out what to do with your life. So different kind of thingies, but yeah, good stuff. Nice. I have lots of thoughts about this.
Really?
Stuff. Yeah.
Why don't you do a newsletter? What's your newsletter about today? Why don't you do a newsletter about the Tony Robbins stuff?
Yeah, it was about that last week. It may be about that this week as well. We'll see.
Oh, it was about that last week.
You've not been reading the newsletter, bro.
Oh, I must have. I do read the newsletter. I do. No, the thing is actually my personal email is just a total mess because everything goes into this other bucket, and so I just have to regularly scan the other bucket and see, okay, do I need to read any of these? And it's like pretty precarious, but it's been working so far.
Nice, that's very good. I'm glad you're organized.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should call that a day then. Good session.
All right.
Nice catching up.
Nice one, mate. See you in a few days.
Bye.